The bowl was still full when Ruthie Knoll picked it up off the floor for the third time that day. Sorrel didn't even look at it. It had been 11 days since the dog lost her puppies. 11 days since Ruthie found her lying on her side on the cold laundry room floor, still trying to clean bodies that no longer moved. Since then, Sorrel had barely eaten, and every night she did the same thing. She left the empty nest Ruthie had kept exactly as it was, towel still folded as before, and walked to the back door. She stood there, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for almost an hour. Cal Knoll heard the scratch of claws against wood for the second time that week and came downstairs quietly, barefoot, the floor cold under his feet. He found his wife sitting on the kitchen floor beside the dog, both of them staring at the same closed door. "She wants to leave, Ruthie. She wants her puppies back, Cal." Neither of them was wrong about what they were seeing. They were only wrong about why. Sorrel had been a stray before she showed up pregnant in the Knowles yard, thin and wary, a little over a month ago. Ruthie let her in because of the rain. She never left again, not until the premature labor, not until the laundry room turned from a place of hope into a place of grief. Now, every day, the same scene repeated itself. Sorrel would leave the nest, ignore the food, gather scraps of fabric into small piles, as if arranging something only she could see, and walk to that door. To Ruthie, it looked like a mother still searching for the children she'd lost. To Cal, it looked like a stray who had never truly accepted living inside a house. Both readings seemed to make sense. Together, they formed a complete story, tragic but understandable. Sorrel was undone by the loss, and now she wanted to go back to the only life she'd ever known. It was Etta, their 13-year-old daughter, who opened the door that night, just to see what would happen. Sorrel didn't bolt. She walked, straight to one specific section of the back fence, the same spot every time, where she stopped and faced the tool shed belonging to their neighbor, Vi Kessler. She went still, nose lifted, ears turned toward the shed, not the yard in general. Etta watched, then called her parents over. "She does this every time, always the same spot." Ruthie looked past the fence and saw nothing but old wood and overgrown grass. "She's smelling the street, Etta, that's all it is." Cal nodded, agreeing. "We're trying to find a way out." Neither of them asked why Sorrel never tried the front door. Neither of them asked why she never sniffed at the side gate, never followed the cars passing on the street, never tested another part of the fence. She always went to the same place and stood there, ears fixed on one point, waiting. By the second week, Ruthie had started sleeping on the laundry room floor. She thought staying close would help. She kept the nest untouched, dimmed the lights, spoke softly whenever Sorrel stirred. She told herself grief needed patience, not correction. It didn't change anything. Sorrel still left the nest every few hours, still walked to the back door, still stood facing the same corner of the yard, ears angled toward the shed, and waited. Cal grew more anxious. He started keeping Sorrel on a leash whenever she went outside, worried one open gate would be all it took for her to disappear back into the street she came from. But something about that didn't sit right with him. A dog looking for a way out doesn't behave like this, he thought, watching her from the porch one evening. Sorrel wasn't pulling toward the open side yard. She wasn't testing the gate latch. She walked in a straight line to the same 6 feet of fence every time and stopped. She never went anywhere else. Ruthie noticed something too, though she didn't yet know what to make of it. One afternoon, hoping to ease what she still believed was grief, she quietly removed the nest. She folded the towels away, cleared the corner, told herself it might help Sorrel move forward. Sorrel didn't search for it. She didn't whine at the empty spot or dig at the floor where the nest had been. Instead, she picked up a dish towel from the counter and carried it to the back door. Then another. She lay down beside the small pile she'd made, eyes fixed on the yard beyond the glass. "She's still doing it," Ruthie said quietly. even without the nest. Cal frowned. Maybe it's not about the nest at all. Neither said the next thought aloud, but it sat between them. If the nest wasn't the reason, their whole explanation had a hole in it. They started paying closer attention without meaning to. Sorrel didn't react to the mail carrier's cart, or the neighbor's car pulling out of the driveway, or the kids playing 3 yards over. Ordinary sounds passed through her like static, but certain sounds made her freeze mid-step, thin, high, barely there sounds, and every time her head turned the same direction, toward the shed. Etta finally said what her parents hadn't. "She's not trying to leave," she said one evening, sitting on the kitchen floor with her knees pulled up. "Watch her. She stops, she listens, then she scratches. The scratching isn't the start of it. It's the end." Cal opened his mouth to disagree, then didn't. He'd been so focused on the claws against the wood that he'd never watched what came before. The stillness, the raised nose. Those seconds of complete attention aimed at one point past the fence. That night, for the first time, nobody rushed to open the door the second Sorrel reached it. They stood back and watched. Sorrel walked to the door, stopped, went utterly still, ears tilted toward the shed, nose working the air. She held that position almost 30 seconds before she scratched, low and insistent, at the base of the door. "She's not agitated," Etta whispered. "She's waiting for something." Ruthie felt something shift in her chest. Not an answer yet, but the first real crack in the story she'd been telling herself for 2 weeks. If Sorrel wasn't searching for her puppies, and she wasn't trying to escape to the street, what was she waiting to hear again? Etta started filming. She didn't tell her parents at first. She just propped her phone against the kitchen window each evening and let it run whenever Sorrel got up. Over 4 days, she collected 6 short clips. She watched them back one night at the kitchen table, headphones in, replaying the same 10 seconds. The pattern never changed. Sorrel would rise, walk the same path, stop at the same point near the door, go still, ears forward, angled slightly left, toward the shed, not the yard in general. Nose lifted. A pause that sometimes lasted 20 seconds, sometimes closer to a minute. Only then did she scratch. Etta noticed something else she nearly missed. In 2 of the clips, right before Sorrel went still, there was a faint sound in the background, thin and broken, almost lost under the hum of the refrigerator. She turned up the volume and listened 3 more times before she was sure. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a bird. She brought her laptop to her parents the next morning, headphones plugged into the shared jack so all 3 of them could listen at once. "I need you to hear this," she said, "and I need you to let her finish, all the way. No stopping her before she scratches." Cal looked skeptical. Ruthie looked exhausted. But that evening, when Sorrel rose and started her walk to the door, nobody moved to interrupt her. She reached her spot, went still. The house was quiet enough that they all heard it this time, a faint, high-pitched cry somewhere past the fence line. Ruthie's hand went to her mouth. "That's not the street," she said. "That's an animal." Cal was already reaching for the flashlight. They found Vi Kessler on her porch a few minutes later, and when they asked about her cat, the older woman's face changed. "Mina," she said slowly. "I haven't seen her in 2 days. I thought she was just off doing what cats do." Mina was a free-roaming cat Vi had been feeding for months, never quite a pet, always somewhere between wild and welcome. With Vi's permission, they crossed into the side yard and opened the door of the old storage shed. Behind a stack of folded tarps and garden pots, they found 3 kittens, eyes barely open, cold, crying in short, broken bursts, the exact sound that had been carrying across the yard for days. No sign of Mina anywhere. Ruthie knelt down slowly, and for a moment none of them said anything at all. Every version of the story they'd been telling themselves collapsed in that instant. Sorrel hadn't stopped grieving her own litter, but grief alone had never explained everything she'd been doing. She had been standing at that door every night, oriented toward the same faint sounds and scent drifting across 15 feet of yard, sounds no one else in the house had ever noticed. Dr. Ansel Reed came by the next morning to check on both the kittens and Sorrel herself. "She's still lactating," he said, running a hand gently along Sorrel's side. "The low appetite, the restlessness, that fixed attention toward one spot, it all fits. Her body is still primed to care, and a young animal's cry may be especially difficult for her to ignore. Everything you've described lines up with that." Ruthie thought back to every night she'd sat on the laundry room floor, certain Sorrel was drowning in a grief she couldn't reach. She hadn't been wrong that Sorrel was grieving. She'd only been wrong to think the grief explained everything else. If a dog's behavior has ever seemed to contradict itself, sometimes it's because we're only watching the last step of a longer sequence. There's more on reading that kind of context in the description below. The kittens couldn't stay in the shed. Dr. Reed was clear about that. Without their mother and this young, they needed warmth, feeding every few hours, and close monitoring. The question was where. Ruthie stood in the laundry room doorway that afternoon, looking at the empty corner where the nest used to be. She wanted to say yes immediately. Something in her wanted to fix this the way she hadn't been able to fix anything for Sorrel over the past 2 weeks, but another part of her hesitated. "What if it's too much for her?" she said quietly. "What if bringing them in here, of all places, then we watch her," Cal said. "We don't decide for her, not this time." It was a small sentence, but it landed heavier than he meant it to. They set up a low box near the kitchen, away from the laundry room, and brought the kittens in one at a time. Sorrel stayed beside them on a loose leash. She didn't rush. She lowered herself and approached slowly, bringing her nose toward the first kitten with a careful attention none of them had seen before. She didn't whine. She didn't pace. She lay down beside the box and stayed there. By that evening, one of the kittens had latched onto Nurse, closely watched the whole time. Sorrel's ears stayed soft, flicking only toward small sounds, no longer straining toward the fence line. That night, for the first time in 2 weeks, she ate a full bowl of food without being coaxed. Ruthie sat on the kitchen floor, close enough to rest a hand on Sorrel's back. She thought about all the nights she'd spent on the laundry room floor, certain she understood exactly what the dog needed. She hadn't been wrong to grieve alongside Sorrel. She'd only been wrong to assume the grief was the whole story. Cal watched from the doorway, arms crossed, quieter than usual. "I almost called the rescue back," he admitted. "Told them she wasn't adjusting, that maybe she needed a different kind of home." Ruthie didn't answer right away. "She wasn't failing to adjust," she said finally. "We just didn't know what she was responding to." Etta didn't say much that night. She sat a few feet away, elbows on her knees, watching Sorrel's steady breathing. She was the one who'd learned to watch what happened before the scratching. Not because she knew more than her parents, only because she'd been willing to wait a little longer before deciding what she was looking at. Over the following days, the back door stopped, meaning anything urgent. Sorrel still went outside. She still looked toward the shed now and then, but the urgency was gone. No more standing there, straining toward a sound that had finally been answered. The door that once seemed to separate her from everything she wanted had never been keeping her from the street at all. To Ruthie, it now felt as though Sorrel had been pointing them toward that shed for 2 weeks, long before any of them understood what she meant. Nothing Sorrel had done from the very first night had been random. The interpretation was, what was the first clue that made you realize Sorrel wasn't trying to leave? Tell us in the comments.